Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Inside Out. This is going to be about the mental health problems that people are struggling with. I'll be having a guest who's qualified herself in psychology in three different branches. She's done masters in all of those. She is also a registered practitioner of the HCPC of the United Kingdom. It's my pleasure to welcome Subiksha Raman, who also happens to be my daughter. Welcome, Subiksha. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, let's start off with the qualifications you have. You got three masters in various
Yeah.
branches of psychology. Just talk us through it briefly.
Okay, so my first master's degree was a master's in counselling psychology from the Madras School of Social Work in Chennai. The second was a master's in dramatherapy from the University of Derby in the United Kingdom. And third was a master's in forensic psychology from Nottingham Trent University in the United Kingdom as well.
First things first, we'll start off with the counseling psychology part of it because that was your first master's. What does that entail, or what is it useful for?
So counseling psychologists are those that can help with diagnosis. They also do a lot of research into mental health, the community mental health. So they work a lot with schools, colleges, workplaces, and help people improve any psychological distress symptoms that they might feel. So it's quite extensive, the kind of work that they do. It's not limited, and they can work across the lifespan as well, from kids to adults.
We'll set aside drama therapy for the time being. What is forensic psychology useful for?
Okay, so as a forensic psychologist, one can work within forensic settings, which is not really limited to prisons, but also secure hospitals or anything to do with the criminal justice system. So they can work within that. They kind of do risk assessments and sort of administer questionnaires to kind of assess the situation. Majority of the work also lies in addressing issues that the individual might be facing in whatever setting that they might be in, and kind of helping them with that. But they also go as expert witnesses in trials and offer their expert opinion.
So it's an ocean. Psychology is an ocean. So people need to know the meaning of various terms that are used. Now, for a lay person, what is the difference between a psychologist and a psychoanalyst?
So, a psychologist is any individual that can practice across the different branches of psychology. They might have a specialty. So, because, like you said, psychology is an ocean. So, there are different branches like counseling, clinical, forensic, health, sports, etc. So, these are different branches. So a psychologist is one who practices in any one of them and is trained and has a master's degree, which is like the minimum requirement. So sometimes there's an MPhil degree and sometimes there's a PhD degree as well. Depending on the country they are practicing in, they have to have that specific educational qualification. A psychoanalyst is one who is well versed in psychoanalysis, which is one of the theories proposed by the father of psychology in a way, Sigmund Freud. They deal a lot with interpersonal relationships and the traditional idea of therapy where you go into a clinic and you just lay down on a couch and talk to someone. That was where that is where it started from. Psychoanalysis is where that image started from. So it is very specific to one particular school of psychology started by Sigmund Freud.
You refer to therapy. It's a loose term. What does therapy exactly mean?
So nowadays, a lot of people kind of use the word therapy very loosely, like you said. They do some activity. They're like, "Oh, this is therapy for me." Like a workout is therapy for me, or music is therapy for me. So there needs to be a fundamental distinction between the word therapy and therapeutic. So therapy is the situation where you go in and work with a educationally qualified individual who kind of helps you become better, who kind of teaches you, not teaches, but supports you in your journey of becoming better and alleviating any psychological distress that you might have. Whereas therapeutic is kind of an activity that makes you feel good about yourself. So it's not necessary that you have to do it with a qualified professional. You can do it on your own, like cooking or gardening or working out. So it's very important to understand that basic distinction between therapy and therapeutic.
Mental health problems have been on the rise of late. What do you
Mm.
think is the contributing factor or contributing factors?
I think when you say it's been on the rise of late, it is more of it's being shown outwardly or talked about only now. It has always been there. It's just there is a stigma attached to it. There's a taboo attached to it there. Whereas if you talk about it, you're branded crazy. So it's not really on the rise. Though with the pandemic, there is an increase in people talking about it. Till today, I mean, till the pandemic started, it was still okay. Do I talk about it? Do I not talk about it? Mental difficulties or problems, there can be any reason to it. There's no specific what might be okay for you and me might not be okay for someone else. So people might have relationship problems, people might have difficulties with eating disorders, addiction, difficulties in school, difficulties with anything that happens. So it's not limited, but based on certain triggers, there have been mental disorders or mental illnesses that have been identified. So we can go into that further. But right now, what I just want to say is that there's no specific trigger for the uprise of the number of cases of mental illnesses. Maybe the
What are the
pandemic is one, but yeah.
what are the common mental health problems that
Mhm.
people can get afflicted with?
So mental illnesses is basically on a spectrum. Any mental illness is can be found on a spectrum. It can range from mild symptoms to severe symptoms. The most severe ones that we commonly hear of are anxiety and depression, which in view of the pandemic has there's been a, like you said, an increase in the number of people who have previously never experienced any symptoms are also currently experiencing those symptoms. So these are the most common things. Apart from that, there's bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and those across that spectrum. So those are the most severe ones.
Anxiety, depression are two common words which is heard about more often. Can you just describe a little bit in detail about anxiety, what exactly it is, and what is
Hmm.
depression?
Okay, so as human beings, we tend to have like a range of emotions which extends from happy to sad and everything in between. So there is jealousy, hatred, anxiety, anxious. So anxiety is the disorder. So anxious, you might feel anxious, uncertainty and things like that. So there's a range of emotions that you feel. So it's completely normal to feel all those emotions. But if you feel a particular emotion for longer than a set period of time, so take, for example, depression. The minimum number of, the range of days that you should feel sad for, or a complete change in the person that you are with symptoms like loss of appetite and loss of energy, fatigue, and things like that, you should have had those symptoms for 2 weeks. So only if it's for 2 weeks or more will you be diagnosed as being depressed. Same with anxiety. It's the feeling of feeling very uncertain and feeling very flustered. So it comes with a lot of energy sometimes, and sometimes it might not have energy at all. You might be completely fatigued. Similarly, loss of appetite and things like that. What happens in that case is those might have to happen for a number of days, but you watch them for 6 months. So if it's more than 6 months that you've had these symptoms, together for a number of days, then only are you diagnosed. And all these diagnostic characteristics have been given in this Bible for psychologists, which is the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. We are on the 5th version right now. So it's also available online if anyone wants to check that. But yeah, you need to have a limited number of days in which you feel that particular way in order to be diagnosed. But it's not to discount anyone who feels that way in lesser days. It's still valid, those kind of experiences.
What can trigger mental health problems in an otherwise healthy human being?
So, a very big trigger is people's circumstances. Like, for example, the pandemic, it has triggered a lot of anxiety and uncertainty in a lot of people. So, people's circumstances are an issue. For example, financial stress, relationship stress, academic stress, those are big triggers, especially happening. Apart from that, there are physical illnesses that could contribute to mental illness. For example, a lot of us have been staying indoors since lockdown happened, and in that time we have not stepped out and gotten our requirement of vitamin D from the sun. So when your vitamin D levels drop, you do experience certain symptoms of depression. So a big advice would be getting your vitamin D levels checked. It's quite important. So it's quite a cycle. People tend to separate the mind and the body, but that's not the case. They come together. Your head is not going separately, your body is not going separately. So you need to figure out if physically you're fine, because sometimes if you're not physically fine, that could cause some mental difficulties. And if you have mental difficulties, your physical self is also affected. Like I said, for depression, you might have a loss of appetite and fatigue, and you lose interest in things that you previously enjoyed doing. So it's all completely related to each other. So it's, if you getting one thing checked out, then you should also get the other thing checked out.
Now, somebody from my generation will say all the stresses
Mm-hmm.
you spoke about,
Yeah.
the examination part of it, the financial stress,
Mm.
these things existed all along. Is it overplayed these days?
Personally, coming from my view, I think that everyone has their own threshold point. So certain people's threshold, like you are a sports person, right? So you had to have a really thick skin, and even now I'm sure with you becoming coach of the women's team, people have differing opinions about everything. So you have to have a very thick skin. So your threshold point might be completely different to what my threshold point is when people speak about you. So it's all common. Like the circumstances might be common, but how people react to it might be completely different. And that is very, very important to realize, because an exam is something that maybe 60 students have in common. But out of the 60, 10 of them might be like, oh, exams are fine, I can manage it. But 10 might be like, I hate exams, I don't want to study for exams. So it completely depends on each person's threshold point. And like I said, times have changed since your time. Your exams might not have been I don't know, you might have taken a much more laid back approach, but right now, when I look at certain colleges, there are 99 is the cutoff mark and things like that. There's always pressure that's put. And even if it's not pressure from, your parents or your teachers or something, individuals nowadays put a lot of pressure on themselves.
Are there any indications that an individual can identify that mental health problems
Yeah.
exist in me, or I have mental health problems? Yeah,
Yeah.
are there any indications to identify that?
Yeah, so most individuals know normally who they are as a person. They know themselves from a day-to-day, point of view. So when you start to lose interest in what you previously started doing, if you find any changes in your, interest levels in what you were doing, or if changes in your appetite, changes in your sleep pattern, these are the most common things that you can look out for. It's very important, because it is very uncertain the times, but it's also important to notice the pattern that is going on. Like I said, minimum of 2 weeks you should have experienced those symptoms. So if you look out for these basic points, you'll be able to figure out if how severe it is when you finally reach a professional and they are able to diagnose you. Self-diagnosis is something that is very common now, but I think it's important to go to a professional and be diagnosed if there is
How
something.
how difficult is it for an individual to accept that she is having
Hmm.
mental health problems? How difficult?
Um, I think accepting any difficulty depends on the individual as such. But with mental illnesses, the problem that arises is society's point of view on it. If you have cancer or if you have heart disease or anything that is purely physical, everyone comes and talks to you like, hey, it's okay, and they kind of empathize or kind of tend to understand what is going on. There might be a set of symptoms that a lot of people might kind of fall under, but with mental illnesses, what happens is each person is different. The diagnosis may be the same. Two people might have depression, but their symptoms might be completely different, in the sense that one person might be completely in bed 24/7 and lose interest in doing what they want to do. The other person might be up and about, but it's not that they're not depressed. So it's difficult to kind of understand what your symptoms are, and once you assimilate that, you might be better accepting of it. But then it comes with the social stigma of, oh, this person has depression, they must be crazy, which is still evident and still rampant in our country, in our society. But it is slowly getting better. Like I said, with the pandemic, people are more open about voicing out their mental health difficulties, and people are slowly talking about it. So hopefully in the future, talking about it more will be helpful in people accepting that they have are going through certain difficulties.
This mental health ailment, is it a one-off in general or can it recur?
So the brain is a very, very funny thing. Sometimes what happens is, like I said, you don't understand it at all. So for example, anxiety and depression is something that people might have for the rest of the life. But it kind of depends on how they manage their symptoms. So there are a lot of ways in which one can manage those symptoms. Life may become much more bearable for some people in terms of managing the symptoms. So I think that is very important. It's not like a heart attack, right? That comes once and maybe never comes again. This is your brain. Your brain chemistry has been changed in a way. So it does recur. It is an ongoing thing. But you learn to figure out what works best for you in terms of managing those symptoms.
If you overcome one kind of mental ailment, is it possible to get afflicted with another one?
Yeah, because okay, so in terms of physical health, there is a term called comorbidity, which means if you have a certain illness, if you have a certain disease, it is possible for you to be susceptible to another one. So, which is like, for example, COVID, if you have asthma or any like breathing related problems, you might be more susceptible to COVID because it comes in through your respiratory system. So that is called comorbidity. So it's very possible that if you have one particular mental illness, there might be shades of another, but it's not necessary that it might be a completely different thing. You might have, like I said, it's on the spectrum. So you kind of might have shades of multiple thing. But anxiety and depression, for example, are completely different. But they're often grouped together because they do occur together at times. So, yeah.
You're practicing a method called dramatherapy to help people overcome their mental problems,
Yeah.
or the mental health problems. What is that all about?
So drama therapy is the use of theater or drama techniques for helping people improve their mental health. So what happens essentially is, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, therapy has a very, image. When you say therapy, there is an image in everyone's head wherein you go into, the office and you lay down on the couch and you talk about it. But that's not the case with drama therapy. You come into the space and you kind of do fun theater activities, which may involve role play or, just games and, mime and improvisation and character building and things like that to help you address and explore the difficulties that you might be feeling. In what way it is different from traditional therapy is that traditional therapy requires more of talking. So there's a lot of words that are exchanged. But in drama therapy or any arts-based therapy, for a matter of fact, it's not necessary that you have to speak. You can use all these alternative methods to communicate. So that is the way in which it is essentially different from traditional therapy.
How effective is it in comparison to counseling psychology?
So, like I said, words are not that important. So it is effective in the sense that if you are someone who's not very articulate, like take a child, for example, they might not know that, something is going on for them. Or, the parents might see behavioral issues, but the child might not see it. So how does the child that is sent to drama therapy come into the space and tell you, okay, this is what is going on? Or if someone who's been through some trauma, they might not really want to talk about it and be like, so this, like, go by a play by play. They don't want to replay what they've been through. So drama therapy gives people that freedom to kind of distance themselves by maybe making up a separate character and talking in third person instead of saying, okay, this happened to me. So it reduces the risk of re-traumatization. But in counseling psychology, what happens is you might talk about it or you might not talk about it. That is completely the client's discretion. So it depends on what the client wants. But counseling has more of questionnaires and, answering those kind of questions and kind of figuring it out through words. Yeah, they might use alternative methods, but drama therapy heavily focuses on, the mind and the body, because theater and drama is all about connecting the mind and the body. If someone just stands there and says words on a stage, you're not going to connect. So it kind of uses the entire body, whereas counseling is more cognitive in a sense. It kind of uses only your words and your mind and exercises your mind more.
So, in short, my understanding of it is that drama therapy makes you come out of yourself, which is
Yes.
a lot more effective in you being free in your expressions and coming out with the problems you have.
Yeah. So, for example, people who kind of are introverted and want to be more extroverted, it gives them a space to practice that. So you don't really have to immediately go out into the world and be like, hey, I'm extroverted. You can start step by step, which the therapy space gives you, like, like a rehearsal kind of thing for the real world. Even for example, how people, I don't know if you'll understand, but a lot of people stand in the shower and imagine kind of arguments they are having, replaying arguments that they might do. So it's kind of a safe space that they have to practice and then go out into the real world and get it done with.
When I start doing that, I know I need to have a different conversation with you.
Yeah, but no, it's very common. I do replay like conversations like, oh, I should have said this, oh, I should have said that. So it's kind of that, everyone does it at some point.
Like everything else, it's important to choose the right kind of therapy and the therapist, isn't it?
Yes. So this is something that I am very, very vocal about. If anyone knows me, so it's extremely important to know the educational qualifications of your therapist. A lot of people especially in India, sometimes what happens is there is no regulation of people who are mental health practitioners. So they go to 1 week workshops, 2-day workshops, and come back and they call themselves by a particular title. So it is very, very important to
No
understand.
bashing others, no bashing others. Stick
I'm
to the
not
topic,
bashing, it's the
Subiksha.
truth.
No.
It's the truth. So yeah, so I think it's important to kind of ask whoever your potential therapist is about what they've studied, where they've studied, and understand if they are trained to handle the kind of problems you come with. Because I, as a drama therapist, I'm trained in handling people who have mild symptoms of depression and anxiety. But if it is a more severe thing, They kind of have to be diverted towards people who are much more trained, because I'm still at the beginning stages of my practice. People who are more experienced, it would be better to guide them towards them who will be better able to handle them. So it's important for you to know what your therapist can handle, and for the therapist to know what they can handle. So if you ask someone their qualifications, please make sure to get an answer. It's very, very important for that. And on that line, searching for a therapist, you don't have to go to the first therapist you see. You can shop around for a bit, because one of the most important factors in the success of your therapeutic journey is the relationship that you share with your therapist. So only if you're comfortable with them, only if you find them trustworthy and you can be honest with them, will you be able to come to a session and open up to them. Otherwise, it's just you going week after week and spending money and not gaining anything from the process. So go talk to multiple people, multiple therapists, see who best suits you, who you're most comfortable with, and then begin the process. No, a good therapist is not going to feel bad when you say, "I don't want you as as my therapist." That doesn't happen.
So you're saying it's something akin to a doctor or your hairdresser or your tailor.
Exactly. You need to know the best fit. You need to
Uh,
figure it out.
a layperson perhaps doesn't know on how to select a therapist, because
Mm.
there are so many branches of therapy, so many branches of
Mhm.
psychological interventions that are spoken about. How
Mhm.
does a person decide which particular branch that she needs to adhere to?
So I think the most a lot of people with mild symptoms, like I said, like they might just start to feel like, oh, I'm starting to feel anxious, or I'm starting to feel a particular way. Immediately, the first person that you can approach is any therapist at a particular level, like, whether it's a drama therapist or a talk therapist, you can go to them. So like I said, ask around and then go to them. So they are trained to handle you at whatever you bring to that, and they, at a certain level, they are able to at least figure out what might be going on with you. If they feel that you might have something more severe going on, they might direct you towards a clinical psychologist who is a specialist in diagnosing people with illnesses, who will then send you to a psychiatrist. Which brings me to a very, very important distinction that needs to be made between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. A psychologist is one who diagnoses you, who draws up treatment plans and kind of performs interventions with you. Whereas a psychiatrist may also be trained in that, but they have a doctor's degree, an MD degree, so they can prescribe you medication. So if you go to a psychologist and they feel that you might benefit from medication, then they send you to a psychiatrist. Or sometimes it's the other way around. There's a big bridge that is built between psychiatrists and psychologists.
You are registered with the British organization called the HCPC. Why is it important?
So I trained in the UK, and after my degree, it was mandatory for me to register with the HCPC, which is the Health and Care Professions Council. What the HCPC essentially does is kind of regulates the people who are practicing the profession that they have registered with. So they maintain a registry. Kind of, you can go to their website and enter the name of someone that you're seeing. This is specifically for the UK. You can go there, enter, and see if they're registered. Only if they're registered are they allowed to practice. Because all these titles, like arts therapist, drama therapist, and even those who, social workers and things like that, they're all protected titles, which means you need to be qualified, and only then can you practice. So this 2-day workshop, 1-week workshop, people will not be able to register with them. They have a particular degree that you need to complete in order to be registered. I maintained that registration because unfortunately in India, there is no licensing body. Psychology in India focuses more on the clinical psychologists who I've mentioned before. So they are registered and licensed by the RCI. So there is a list of clinical psychologists that is available, but other modalities of therapy like counseling psychologists or expressive arts therapists, drama therapists, we don't have a body that we register with and kind of ensures that we practice in an ethical manner. So that is one downside to practicing in India. But I'm hopeful that as drama therapists, I have 8 other colleagues who practice in India. We are coming together, and hopefully someday in the future we'll also be able to have a licensing and a regulatory body.
Things can horribly go wrong if you don't go to the right therapist or right person, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. For example, like when I mentioned, when you're choosing your therapist, you need to ask for your education, for their educational qualification. One of the reasons to do that is because you need to know if they're trained in handling you. If they're not trained in handling your particular difficulties, they can do more damage than they can do good. So you might be worse than when you went in. And this is not a situation where you're worse before you become better. This might be a situation where you're worse and you get worse. So it's very important to ensure that the person that you go to is trained in that particular thing, in particular difficulty that you are going to experience. It's like if you have cancer, you can't go to an ENT specialist. You have to go to an oncologist.
Does a healthy physique help in preventing the onset of mental health problems?
Exercise is important because it kind of not reduces, sorry, it, gets your happy hormones out and about. It reduces your stress. That's what I was going to say. It reduces your stress, but it's not necessary that it can, push away the symptoms of mental difficulties. It's just a way to help, because what happens is when you have mental health issues, your brain is always working. So when your brain is always working, you're quite tired by the end of it. So you might not really want to even push yourself physically. So while it might be a way of just for the time being releasing happy hormones like and endorphins and things like that, it's not necessary that it keeps you happy all the time.
Even tremendously fit athletes who are successful, they are also subjected to mental health problems. Why is that?
Like I said, being physically fit doesn't mean that your happy hormones will prevent anything else from happening. The body, the mind is a very, very funny thing. I remember you've told me growing up, cricket is a very funny game. You might be winning in 1 over and you'll end up losing the match. So it's very similar here. You might do everything to try and prevent something, but it's very funny. It kind of ends up happening. And a lot of people, the kind of stress that comes with it, I remember off the top of my head, there was, I can't remember her name. I think Sarah Taylor, if I'm not wrong, from the England women's team. She kind of took a break from cricket because she felt like her mental health was being affected. And then there was, I think, what's his name? Oh my God, what's his name? The bowler from Flintoff, Freddie Flintoff. He was
There have
one
been,
who,
there have
yeah.
been many who have taken a break,
Yeah.
at the peak of their
Yeah.
career.
For me,
So,
it came up for me when I was training. So those are the two names that I kind of quickly came up with. And so it's quite important because there's a lot of stress that goes with it. You have to perform, then only you will be in the team. And then, a lot of things that happen backstage with being a professional athlete. So it's quite important to realize that just because you're fit doesn't mean it won't affect you. Anyone is susceptible, and what matters is getting the help that you need to help you feel better.
does diet have anything to do with the upkeep of mental health well-being?
The stomach is a very, very important part of keeping you happy, because a happy stomach is, they tell you, any doctor will tell you, you need to eat properly, sleep properly. So eating right gives you kind of the happy hormones again. Not, I don't know if I'm right when I say that, but it keeps you healthy. So a healthy physique will kind of help you alleviate any distress symptoms that you might have. But sometimes you do end up having those symptoms. But it's important to eat right and keep happy that way.
What impact does your profession have on you? Because people presumably come and talk about not so happy things that are going on in their lives. You listen to that all the time.
Yeah.
What impact does it have on you? Does it have a really negative impact?
I wouldn't say negative impact, because I quite like listening to people tell me about their lives. Yes, sometimes there may be not nice stories that are shared with me. And, um, I often say that being a therapist, my work is not limited to that 1 hour that I spend with my client. Sometimes when I'm doing something else, I do something, and my mind is like, oh wait, this will help with this client, or I think about a client. So my mind is always working around the kind of work that I do. But I know that it might have an impact on me, whether it is positive or negative. That depends on the situation and how I respond in that situation as to how I want to take it. But I've been trying to keep myself also, active and healthy, and take care of myself so I can take care of my clients. Because if I was unhealthy and if I am being severely impacted, I would also take the step to go to a therapist. That wouldn't stop me. So it's very common for therapists to go to therapists, because you're hearing a lot of things. So it's important to take care of that. So I try to do my best to look after myself in
What is
whatever
the
way.
what is the level of responsibility that you people have? I think it's quite high.
Ooh, this is a very, very important question, because as therapists, we are responsible for looking after vulnerable people. So if you have like toddlers to look after, babies, newborn babies, the amount of responsibility that goes when you hand someone a newborn baby and ask them to hold it. It is very, very similar to that, because clients who come in are extremely vulnerable, and they just want the space to be held, and they want the space to be about themselves. So you have to be responsible for that. You have to be responsible for living up to the promises that you make in the form of a contract at the beginning. So there's a big responsibility on your head known as confidentiality, which comes with the territory of being a therapist. You need to handle that. And you need to kind of make sure that you periodically review what is happening in the session, so you know whether it's going towards working, or if you need to rethink what you're doing and things like that. So it's just a lot of responsibility sometimes, and that might get to you. But with the pandemic, we have an additional responsibility of doing online sessions, which is the biggest problem, because you need to send out invites for the meeting. You need to make sure they pay you after that, and it's yeah, it comes with the territory.
Do you see a reduction in terms of the societal stigma when it comes to mental health issues?
I think so. I went off to England in 2014. So at that point of time, when I said I was going to study drama therapy, a lot of people like, what is that? And when I said I was going to be using drama techniques for psychological therapy, they kind of like were like, ah, okay, whatever. And today, when I come back, the same people that said, ah, okay, whatever, would be like, yeah, that's a very important job, right? Like, you need to kind of deal with people right now. I think what has happened is, while more people who, especially people in the public eye, are talking about it, they're trying to speak about it and normalize it, make it a household term that is being used. What has helped tremendously with more people talking about it is the pandemic, because it is something that came out of the far left. No one really thought it was going to happen. No one thought lockdown was going to happen, and the kind of impact that it will have on people. So I think There is social stigma still, but it is not as much as it was when I left 5 years ago. And in some cases, I'm still fighting with people who think therapists are a quack and it's not necessary. But it's much better than it was. And I think it's people like me and my colleagues, like we have to put up a fight now to talk about what's right in terms of mental health and the kind of training that is necessary. So hopefully in the future, we'll leave a world that is okay with seeking help with mental difficulties.
Use the word spectrum quite often in our chat. Now, the danger probably I am seeing is that it should not get to a stage where this becomes more of a fad
Mm.
than being looked upon as a serious issue.
So people have the propensity for using words, terms from mental health in a very casual manner. Like if they're very sad, they'll be like, "Oh no, I'm depressed today." Or if you're very good with organization, they'll say, "Oh, you're OCD." Or if people are fine and then suddenly they get angry for certain circumstances, people like, "You're bipolar." So these words are quite thrown very casually nowadays, which I'm hoping is not the case in the future, because, like you said, it shouldn't become a fad to be called in those terms. They are very, very serious things, especially OCD, bipolar. All these illnesses affect your day-to-day functioning. Even anxiety and depression, mental illnesses affect your day-to-day functioning. So it's not something that should be made fun of or just dismissed. If someone says something that they're experiencing something, listen to it and guide them in a particular way. Tell them to seek help, that it's okay to seek help. And it's not necessary, like I said some time ago, when two people have depression, they might not have the same symptoms. So that is why I said they might be on a spectrum of the symptoms. So some people might be high functioning and be able to get things done, and they might still be depressed. Whereas someone might not be as able to function that well, and that is also depression. So there are different shades to the particular mental illness. So yeah.
So, when do you see things coming to a situation where everything is well organized?
I think the first step in that would be getting a regulatory body that kind of keeps track of all those who are practicing here. Because, with the advent of social media, what has happened is anyone can start a page and share mental health information that is available online. So I think it's important for, a regulatory body where you have to register and you have to be licensed, and they do regular checks as to how your practice is going. If you are someone who has trained abroad or who has done a master's degree, that it is very important to have supervision, which is essentially, even if you practice as an individual, you find someone who is trained as well, and you go to them for supervision so that they tell you that, okay, you are doing it right, and they keep track of what you're doing. They kind of regulate you in a way. So once the regulation happens, I think more people that register, slowly it becomes better, because it will weed out all the people who don't really have those degrees and are not in a way allowed to practice. So when that happens, more authentic information can be spread. And people who experience mental health difficulties, if they are more open about it, which I'm sure a lot of people are already, a few more years, and I think if they are much more open about it, that would be helpful as well. And I wish society would stop making fun of people who seek help as being branded as crazy. That would be a big ask, but from where I am, I hopefully see it happening in the future. So let's hope for the best.
Is there anything that you would suggest which can postpone people getting afflicted with mental health issues, or probably not even get affected by it at all? Is there anything that you would like to say that they practice which will help them?
Yeah, so they say prevention is better than cure. So a lot of people have been, trying to find the work life balance, which is quite important in that, because with the pandemic making everyone work from home, it has become more of a, I will work 24/7. I have to work 24/7 now because my boss expects me to be online, all the time. What else do you have to do? But what happens is they don't realize there are other things also happening in the house outside of the laptop screen. So I would advise keeping yourself healthy in terms of eating and sleeping. They are very, very important. And getting regular health checkups. Like I said, if you have a vitamin D deficiency or if your gut is not healthy, they can manifest as both physical and mental symptoms. That is something that you can do for yourself. And it's not shameful to seek help for anything. The minute that you find yourself kind of sort of becoming someone you don't recognize, I think it's important to go and get yourself checked. There's nothing wrong with that, whether it is physical or mental.
Thank you, Subiksha. Hopefully, people will latch on to what all you said and go about doing things the right way. And wish you all the very best in the future.
Thank you so much, Dad, for having me.
There it was. Might have been a bit serious, but nonetheless, it's very important for people to understand that the mental health issues have to be addressed and it has to be done the right way. Take care and stay safe. I'll catch up with you on Friday once again.